Hello and welcome to our panel. I am Natasha McKenzie, not as advertised over lunch, I think, on the screen, Frances Lucroft. That wasn't my AI. I haven't been rebranded. Although I do run Talisman Sparro, which is a brand marketing consultancy, at which I have the privilege of working with Kate and her wonderful team at Stornaway. So welcome, Kate, to the panel today. We're here to talk about the potential of generative AI. We've only got half an hour, so we'll keep it brief. But yeah, Kate, a very successful and talented broadcaster, producer, now a very successful tech CEO at Stornaway.
Thanks, Natasha.
Joyann, who I've had the privilege of knowing for a number of years also, and seeing your sort of journey, I guess, from you were sort of saying earlier, a kind of self-made marketeer, now running a very successful venture, Include.ai, which we'll hear more about, I'm sure. And Judith, who I've only recently met, but I'm very pleased to have met, because you are an expert, I know, obviously a kind of a sort of patent lawyer, but also an expert on the kind of potential of generative AI. And I hear you're not going to be the naysayer necessarily on the panel, but you're going to help keep us and hold us to account, maybe a little.
As Stuart was saying earlier, maybe he was saying that he and the accountant are a bit of a tether. Now I think IP advisors can be a bit of that too. So I'm afraid I've got that role.
No, that's good. You're here to kind of keep us on the straight and narrow as well. And I think as we heard earlier from Margaret today, and it was alluded to on the panel before, we don't have to lay down in front of the tank. It's with intention, of course, that we choose to use these tools in our everyday life and our work life. But Kate, I'm very keen to sort of share with the audience today, and do come up with your own questions while I'm talking. I have got questions for our panel today, but also keen to kind of make this
feedback.
interactive.
I don't know, can anyone else hear the feedback?
Okay, I'll lean back. Is that better?
Musician was what I was before I was a tech founder.
I'm leaning in.
Yeah, there we go.
Is that better? Right, I'll lean in to our conversation.
Lean in.
So would you like to share with us a little bit about, I guess, the potential of generative AI and how you've embraced that at Stornaway, but also how you're seeing the creative community using Stornaway?
Yeah, sure. I was really interested to hear the question about Sora, the generative AI video tool, because of course we've made an interactive video editor for next generation content, which lets any creator, non-codey people like me, make interactive video games for learning, for TV. We had multiple markets when we started the business. And I think, I've had to come on a journey to understand what AI is, having come from a theatrical music background where I basically was like, I don't know if anyone saw that thing on social media, which is like, I want AI to do the dishes and my admin rather than the art and my creativity. So I was very biased against it. And I guess in the last year, we raised money for the business because we started to see this traction of people who wanted this creative authoring tool. And we designed Stornaway for people who had creative tools, so filmmakers and TV people who knew how to use video. But where we've ended up being used, because we launched via Google Ads back in the pandemic, is by learning teams, by marketing comms people in HR, people who actually don't know how to necessarily make creative things. So we're in this really interesting space where I am all for enabling people who don't think they're creative to make creative, exciting, digital, engaged pieces of work. But I'm really against taking away from the creators I know and love who can write and make video. And I think with video, there's a really interesting thing, which is we recently integrated Adobe Express tools into Stornaway. So now you can open up our interface and you can use the amazing AI that Adobe are working with. And they say it's ethical, and we've had to ask some questions about that as a business. But going to one of their conferences, you could see the creator community blown away by the technological advances in what's possible with video, in how you can no longer have to spend several months kind of changing a background. You know, all of that is amazing. But I think differentiating that from actual storytelling is really important. And, you know, where we come from is we've made a tool to communicate with your audience, and you do that through humans. And so whatever the tech is doing, it should be serving that human connection. And I think that's so important. So just to finish up, an interesting use of AI, my co-founder who designed essentially the tech for Stornaway with our amazing developers we worked with in Bristol to get us with our MVP, he recently started using ChatGPT to help with the coding. Because, of course, now, if you're an entrepreneur and you know a little bit about coding, you can use ChatGPT as like a assistant. And if you know how to ask the right questions, you can do amazing things. You know, the money we had to spend on our MVP 5 years ago, I don't think we would have to do that now. But he then created an entire story map in Stornaway, which is what a lot of our healthcare companies, for example, they're doing scenario training with choices and questions and things. And he was like, we were talking to investors, and he was like, shall I tell them about the AI-generated story map? And as a business, we had a really serious question, which is, yeah, that's really cool, and it looks really cool, but actually, what's it taking away? And what's it going to take away from the learning teams who are actually doing more thoughtful, crafted stories, thinking about bias, thinking about the messages they're giving? And I think that's where we are now, is like using AI really thoughtfully to do the jobs that are sort of boring and labor intensive, but really paying attention to how much humans need to lead storytelling.
Great, yeah. Keeping the humans in the story.
Yeah.
So Joyann, do you want to maybe give us a little bit of background, but also an overview to your approach? I think would be really great.
So I kind of entered the AI space back in 2018 with the delusion that I feel a lot of the media has today, that, you know, AI could do my job at the time, and I'm still an inclusive marketing consultant. So I spend a lot of my time telling brands and companies what is racist, sexist, and ableist about the content that they're producing and publishing. So I'm like, okay, AI could do everything. Can it do that? It can't. But what I learned a lot, I decided to dive in and do a master's in data science, specializing in bias detection. And we're using the parts of AI to help decode the elements in language to help people understand why their sentence structure may be offensive to others. So our whole mission is to make inclusive language like the standard across the world. And it's funny, being in this space for so long, I've gotten used to detecting and spotting where something could go wrong very easily. So even in Sora, if you look at some of the videos, you tend to see a common skin tone, you tend to see a common body type, you tend to see a common thing it can generate, because it's learned it from a demographic of data that isn't inclusive. And we're in a cycle now where everyone's adopting the tools, but not everyone's aware of the data that it's been learned on. And I use the analogy that AI, to me, will always be a puppy that has been trained by someone else, and you're bringing a puppy into your house, you don't know how it's been trained, so you need to be mindful. It could eat your shoes, it could be a guide dog. We don't know. But a lot of the companies that I've mentioned, like Sora, Adobe, I always chuckle when I hear Adobe, because I think it was recently they were mentioning they're willing to pay people for pictures of their hands and feet, and I was like, okay, they're running out of data, but these are the elements in the conversations that I think entrepreneurs need to be aware of when they're bringing in AI into their product or tool. Like, what are the biases are they adopting as well?
And I think with a big company like Adobe, I mean, we were just like, at least Adobe are talking about ethical situations in AI, whereas the other companies are not, you know, But yes, I totally agree.
And I'm always going to come at generative AI from my intellectual property background, which is, you know, when we're working with people, entrepreneurs, startups, big companies, what they're really trying to protect is human endeavour. You know, so you've put some effort in to get something out. Now, when you're using generative AI, where's the effort? Like, so if you're getting something out, do you have questions that we ask, you know, did you really create that code? Which, if you created it line by line, you'd have copyright, right? then you could enforce your intellectual property. If you create a beautiful video, a beautiful image, did you really create that? Are you really the author? Is it original? All of these questions. Is there something that you're protecting that it's guffed it out for you? Brilliant. Have you got something protectable out of it? Because we're trying to really help people protect their position, based on what they produced.
Yeah. And how can you just talk us through a little bit more on that, Judith? How do you do that? What do you advise?
Yeah. So in the context of people using AI.
Yeah, I guess in terms of Kate's point there about if you suddenly go, oh my God, look what it's done my work for me.
Well, yeah, then I'd have questions about
where
the copyright.
Haven't done it. I was going to say, I think that's why we haven't done it, because actually the way that people use Stornaway, mostly what they love about it is that they can put their own words in and they can tell a story very quickly and press play, and they can see that in a kind of video. It's hard to explain. Go to the platform, it's free to sign up. But yeah, so I think you're right, is we're not about spinning stuff out, and I think that's where we realise that's not an area we want to go down.
Yeah, and go on.
I was going to say, I recently heard a legal term, let me know if it's a thing or not, but you can sue based on injury to feelings.
I'm not a specialist in that, so.
But I won't take the law, but it's interesting because if there's the element that someone could go in and create content and craft it a certain way and create something that's potentially harmful, and someone feels you have injured their feelings, I love the term because I was just like, how do you define that? But who's responsible? And that's the element of, do you then say, okay, the AI did 80% of the work, so therefore we are not responsible for the harm this content may have caused? Or because it came from our company, we are all responsible? The law is leaning on the side who published it is the one who's going to be sued.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I think it goes back to this point of intention, doesn't it? Sorry, Kat, I'm going to go back to Judith. Just on that kind of that question that I just put to you there, and then kind of using that Stornaway example might not have been the right one, but what do you generally advise if somebody comes to you and they are baking AI or generative AI into a product?
Yes, to be really careful, actually. Yeah. I mean, so I think lots of businesses are starting to use generative AI, often not actually public. The public stuff, obviously, sometimes enterprise level solutions, sometimes air-gapped stuff, and the reason that they're doing that is because they're worried quite often about confidential information within the company. So if you are a startup and you are using public AI, I'd be really, 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 really careful about putting any kind of confidential information in, about prompting it using confidential information, because there's a reasonable argument that you are not keeping that confidential anymore, and it could be leaked back out again, it could be used back out again. So that's definitely something I talk to clients about. And then in terms of when you're using it to create things, like something that people could be offended by, or I think you need to be really careful again that you're not infringing someone else's copyright by prompting it. There's a very famous Getty Images case where people prompted an image generation tool, and it produced an image which had the Getty Images thing on it. So it had obviously been trained on confidential information, or paid for information, not confidential information, and they were infringing copyright. If you prompt something to generate you a lovely picture of something, it probably is worth checking whether anything like that already exists, whether you could be infringing someone's copyright. Likewise with words that you're using, likewise with code. I mean, in all of these cases, you could be infringing someone's copyright by using.
And that's about the use case, really. Yeah. I mean, in our case, people are communicating internally and doing corporate training.
Yeah, inside.
And also, I would say that Adobe Express, actually what people really like about it is not the AI, they use it as a video editor. So as a startup, it meant we didn't have to build our own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's kind of those options of integrating, but I agree with ChatGPT, we haven't incorporated that, even though our investors, we didn't go with them because they were like, you need to do this, and we were like, we're not going to do that. time will tell whether that was a good decision if it's still around.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not saying don't use it, but just be aware of exactly how you're going to use it. Whether it is something you're using internally, and you're going to have a take on this still.
I was going to say, in terms of ChatGPT, Gemini, any of the large language models out there, there's two analogies. Well, I would say in regards to the data, if you think of it like taking sand to a beach, you've put in your stuff, but can you get that sand back out? No. You can literally take a microscope and try and pick it back, but someone else can pick up your sand. So someone else can generate your thing or your product. And using those models out there, especially with OpenAI, Sam Altman has very openly said that he doesn't really care about people building product on top of his APIs and his things. He will change it tomorrow. So the recommendation I have, if anyone's looking to integrate stuff, is look at the open source things, look at the things that you can host yourself, if that's the level you're going. Now, if you're using a generative AI model, Gemini, OpenAI, there's another one, Claude, I do not like Claude, personal opinion, just be mindful that you might be picking up someone else's sand. So check it as much as you can.
Aren't we in a world where
everything's
by watching anything, we are giving it away? Like, I go back to Margaret Heffernan, which is like 3 companies basically controlling everything. So at some level, yes, us mere mortals have to be careful, but also like, how do we, it's a bigger ecosystem that we're navigating here. And it's hard enough as a startup. You know, and actually, interestingly, the thing I would say about using it to make something quickly, so the biggest challenges to any startup are money and time. And, you know, we were lucky enough to get some funding, to grant funding to make it happen. But I think it's an interesting landscape now for someone who doesn't have access to funds. Like, is there a way to use it? I mean, I'm sure there will be organizations who will help you understand how to code, how to kind of use the code in a way that still keeps your IP. As we know, IP is quite hard to get anyway.
I think there's a balance. The one, yes, money is difficult, but money is difficult for us to hire experts who could just do the work for us. That's one of the things as entrepreneurs. We can get like interns, we can get all this labor, but normally we need someone who can go ahead and do the project and we don't ask us a question. Like, we want someone who can just bring it back. And I think AI is now balancing that element of trust it as much as you trust a first day intern in your company.
I agree. Yeah.
I love your puppy analogy. Be careful who you bring into your home or your office environment. I'm going to open up to questions. I'm sure, as you can hear, we've got an opinionated, a very expert sort of panel with lots of ideas and insight to share. So has anyone got any questions for them? I come up to the front.
Thank you. It's Alex from British Salmon. I don't know if this is a stupid question or not, but I'll ask it anyway.
No such thing.
So if I create something and it's my grain of sand and somebody runs it through a large language model and produces something else, are there any tools out there at the moment to track my grain of sand? Can I attach something to my grain of sand which means I can follow it through and I can see, you've infringed my IP rights because you've taken my grain and used it somewhere else? Is it impossible to do that? Is that something that can happen?
They're trying. The most they can do, and they're not doing it well, you can see on Instagram, is detect if something has been edited by an AI tool. So they can't really pin down your grain of sand. The theory was there with blockchain, but the blockchain hype kind of, I won't mention the blockchain hype went when it went. But in theory, if you were to encrypt your content through blockchain, then feed it into machine, it should, but the detection is not there. A lot of students whose English was their second language were getting penalized because Turnitin was marking their papers as AI generated when it wasn't. Because when you learn English as a second language, you write in a particular way. And we all see how ChatGPT speaks and uses dwell and all these big words. When you learn English as a second language, you tend to use words that most native English speakers don't. So they're trying, we're trying as well, but it's not, can't pin down that grain.
Thank you, Joanne.
Jack at the back.
Sorry, me again. I've got a question for Kate. What do you think the future of video looks like in sort of your corner of the world?
I'm drawn to the first slide of our first ever pitch deck with Set Squared 5 years ago, which is the future of media is interactive and immersive. And the reason we started Stornaway was because my co-founder had worked in media for long enough to see that if you don't make creator tools that move with these trends, then the wider populace get left behind, and it's left to people in technology who can code. And so that was our whole reason for kind of being. It's taken quite a long time for anyone to believe that the future of media is interactive. And I would say the kind of difficult, what was I going to say? There are multiple challenges on the web, for example. Media is dumb blocks. It hasn't got all these, it's got a long way to go. And I think one of the things we're trying to develop is an open object-based media model that the BBC were working with, that kind of talks about media as these layers, so that there can be an open source. Because again, it'll stop the large companies owning, which is what they want to do. They want to own the metaverse, and I think if we can work on that model, and definitely don't talk to me, but talk to my co-founder Roo Howe, who's on LinkedIn, because he's very passionate about this subject.
So a don't choose your own adventure type approach then. Thank you, Jack. Any more questions?
I was going to add to that, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
The problem with that as well is all the data collection. And, when we started the company, it was all about, oh, cool, interactive media, so we can gather everyone's data. And we're like, no! Let's interact, let's have a conversation with people, and understanding that. I would say when we went to the Learning Technologies Conference, it was very nice to see learning designers who were being bombarded by avatars and all the new technology, and they were coming to our stand because we had a banner saying life is interactive, why aren't your videos? So it coming back again to the humans in control of the storytelling.
Yeah, very much. I've got a question for Joyann while we're waiting for you all to come up with something else that you want to ask. So we were chuckling during the previous talk about falling out with ChatGPT, only because I can only imagine you, and you just mentioned there about Claude. So who have you sort of fallen out with? What are the, in the virtual world, obviously, and who do you embrace? Like, what are the platforms? What are the tools that you would recommend?
So I do. One of the fun bits of my job is that I'm constantly looking for bias. So I get into arguments with chatbots a lot.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So Google's Gemini gaslights you the most, because it will promise you that it can do something that it cannot, but it's really good at enhancing copy. So I will take something I've already written and say, what are the pointers you'll do to improve it? So I use that for it. ChatGPT is good with the code, good with solving code problems if you already know what you're looking for. So if you were someone who would go and look on Stack Overflow and spend hours searching there, I go to ChatGPT first, have it over-exaggerated, and I find a simple answer on Stack Overflow. So it's kind of a backwards process. Anthropic by Anthropic was built by some people who left OpenAI wanting to create a more ethical platform. This is where the ethics, and I'm not on the side of ethics, because unfortunately ethics limits creativity right now in AI. Please, I know I'm in bias detection, but it's a separate world. Bias detection, ethics, a separate area. But yeah, Anthropic I don't find as good. In terms of image generation, I think go to the creative platform. So go to an Adobe, go to a Canva, go to any platform that already has the data set to build it. I wouldn't go to a brand new. But also the other element is Canva, Adobe, and those other ones have done work around sourcing diverse content. Like if you ask ChatGPT to generate the image of someone, I did it recently, an SEO director, it will always be a white man with blue screens and glasses. Apparently everyone in SEOs wear glasses. But the other platforms will give you diverse options because the people behind it are aware that there's supposed to be diversity in visual representation. So those are the ones, yeah. But
what's your problem with Claude then, Joyann?
Claude, one, it takes too long. Two, it tries to be diplomatic and just goes so far off. I'm just like, why don't you just give me the answer, let me work it out? Like ChatGPT, we can have a conversation, we can get to a resolution. Claude is just like, no, it's like, oh, I once looked after someone's puppy and it just sat there and stared at me for 2 days. That's what Claude is like. It doesn't really do anything. It's just there. It's just always there, not really giving me more.
We're back to the puppy.
Yeah. They're not easy ones. Like Gemini and ChatGPT are the eager puppies who will, if you say stick, they will find you a tree and bring it back. They will take whatever they want.
Right at the back. Sorry.
Natasha.
Oh, yes.
I think we're a little bit short on time.
Oh. Oh no.
We haven't run over, but okay. You want to wrap it up?
5 minutes if possible.
Yeah, no, we're on 5.
Just a quick question to Judith. If,
Hello.
if I ask AI to create me an image and it happens to create me an incredible iconic image, do I own the copyright to that image or does AI?
Is the work original? Is another question that needs to be asked when we're talking about copyright. So if it has created you something.
It's created something original that's, it's created me an image and it just happens to be an iconic image that everyone loves. And do I own that image? Or can you have intellectual property or something?
You can have intellectual property that you've prompted. I mean, it is specifically addressed in the Copyright Design and Patent Act 1988. It is specifically addressed, and it does say that computer-generated works when you've prompted, when it's created something as a result of input from a user, you would own the copyright. But in that particular case, what's set out in the Act is what would constitute a copy, and so derivative works are also copies. And if it has created something like that, I mean, there's an argument over whether it's really original. So I think you probably wouldn't really have a very strong case for copyright in relation to that.
Maybe one for a cup of tea afterwards or a drink.
Yeah.
I saw some more hands go up here. I'll just take 2 more questions if that's all right, Greg. We've got 2 minutes. That's Adrian.
Hi, Laura Aiken. Hi, my name's Laura. You've got a room full of entrepreneurs, business owners here. How should we be using AI responsibly in our businesses?
We're all looking at you.
Some top threes.
Top 3. I think the number one thing I would say is declare it when you use it, especially if you're using it in decision making. I know we're talking about generative AI, but some people use AI models to make decisions on whether a customer is going to do something or if they're going to get emailed or contacted. I think just declaring it enough so your target audience knows. Secondly, I would say I wouldn't fire anybody. Just encourage anyone you're working with to become more AI enabled. So have a discussion in team meetings about who's using what prompts and how they're crafting it for their niche. Because what we have internally is everyone's encouraged to use generative AI, even though we don't trust it because of what we're building, but we store everyone's prompts. So we know where the thread started. So we know if it ends up with something that's biased or problematic or whatever, we can see where it started. And then we can track back there and be like, okay, this is how we changed it. And I don't think, but it's interesting you mentioned about the percentage and like how much is it creative. If you can track it back to the prompt, I would assume then you have a little bit more defense of, oh, this is what I asked for. If it produced something problematic, that's not my fault. This is what I asked for. Would be my defense. Don't know if it will stand in court.
Well, and it'll probably be something that ends up being.
So you said something really interesting pre sitting on here, which was about just remember that as an entrepreneur, your special sauce is you and your ideas. AI will not make your idea sell, and that idea of just separating out those things a little bit and using it to do the helpful stuff that's boring.
But boring the task, the better to use it for.
Yeah, but agreed. I like the idea of being aware because obviously,
I think that's a good close. I think, given the time, we're on 0 now. But thank you so much to our panel for your questions.